He's going to talk about salmon, and I'll let him introduce himself so that you can understand why he's qualified to talk about it.
Hi, I'm John McManus. I'm the Senior Policy Director for the Golden State Salmon Association. In a nutshell, why is the season closed? It's because we don't have enough salmon out in the ocean right now. Why do we not have enough salmon out in the ocean right now? Because over the last 3 years of drought, the river conditions where the salmon come to reproduce simply got too warm. Most of the eggs laid by the salmon died, and of the few salmon that succeeded in hatching out of eggs, when they tried to get down the rivers to the ocean, when they're 3 and 4 inches long, there wasn't enough flow in the rivers to safely move them down. So we don't have enough salmon. I would say that over the last 3 years during the drought, there were decisions made about how to divide and use the little bit of water that we had. When those decisions were made, they always left salmon and salmon communities and salmon families last. They always put agriculture first. So we didn't have to be where we are today.
Who is they when you say that?
We didn't have to be where we are today. The decisions were primarily made by state and federal water managers, and I'm talking about people with the Department of Water Resources on the state side, people with the Federal Bureau of Reclamation on the federal side. The Federal Bureau of Reclamation runs Shasta Dam. They run the Folsom Dam on the American River. They run the New Melones Dam on the Stanislaus. All of those dams diverted, we would argue, excessively to agriculture at the expense of salmon.
Okay. What does this mean on the whole? Does this mean that salmon are endangered? Does this mean that we're looking at the end of salmon in California? People ask me these questions, and it's helpful to know.
We're going to be down for a year. My guess is next year we will be fishing again, especially with the conditions we've gotten here in 2023 so far with all this rain and snow, which is all that we really needed all along. When we get this type of wet conditions, it's great for salmon. I do expect to see a rebound. But people know often as not we're dealing with drought and some really hard decisions that are made. Too often the water managers just simply don't leave enough water in the rivers for salmon.
Right. Let me ask you this: what were the jack counts like? And can you explain to these folks what jack counts are?
Yeah. So you want a little detail, do you?
Yeah, a little bit. Sorry.
So federal and state water managers want to see a minimum of 122,000 adult fall-run salmon return to the Sacramento Valley every year. Below that, they're uncomfortable. In fact, there's regulations that basically say we need 122,000 minimum. Last year we got 62,000 minimum. So we basically got half of the required salmon.
Oh boy.
And we're talking about adult 3-year-old salmon. In addition, a small number of 2-year-old salmon, you could think of them as teenagers, will come back and spawn 1 year early. It's a small percentage. But based on that number of 2-year-olds, they make a calculation as to how many adult salmon are out in the ocean this year, i.e. how many other 2-year-olds did not come back and stayed out in the ocean for an extra year. So the number of 2-year-old teenagers that came back last year was a very low number. It was 7,000. Which I think was the third lowest in the last bunch of decades. Wow. And between those two numbers, the 62,000 adults, the 7,000 teenagers, we simply didn't have enough to come back to convince fishery managers that we could have a season this year responsibly.
Okay. I think that wraps it up. I do have one question that somebody asked me recently, and that was, why is it, if so many of these fish are coming out of hatcheries anyway, why don't they just milk more females and pour more milks on top of them? Why don't they just produce more young?
A couple of things. The hatcheries in California have been producing more fish over the last few years, largely as a result of advocacy from the Golden State Salmon Association. That's one of the things we've been pushing on, and they've done it. In addition, survival of hatchery fish has gone way up over the last 5 years, again, because of the efforts of the Golden State Salmon Association. And what I'm talking about is, quite often they put the majority of these fish in tanker trucks in the Central Valley, and they give them a ride down to the bay or to the ocean and release them, including right behind me here in Pillar Point Harbor. There's 750,000 fish that are brought here every single year. So survival has been going up, production in the hatcheries has been going up, The last few years we've been living on hatchery fish out in the ocean. The natural spawn ones have been very few and far between. One of the problems is that hatcheries in the San Joaquin system have been getting the best treatment in terms of release practices. They're the ones that have been coming here to Pillar Point Harbor. But we need to get more of the hatchery fish from the Sacramento Valley down here to the coast. Then we'll see numbers rebound in the Sacramento Valley. And it's the Sacramento Valley numbers that matter. That's what fishery managers count.
Okay, I think that's good, and hopefully this helps people understand what's going on a little better. And thanks a lot, John. I really appreciate you giving us some info.
My pleasure.
All right, bye-bye.